Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of StarSound Speaks. This is your host, Irlianna Samsara of StarSound Astrology, episode 209. And I'm so excited because Elodie is back. Elodie St Onge-Aubut, coming in off the grid in Newfoundland, Canada. How do you like that? Welcome back, Elodie.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm so glad that you're here. Wow, especially we are deep, obviously, into eclipse season and times of deep transformation. And I know that our last conversation we had it was about the future of AI and the internet. And it was getting chills just talking about it. It's such a deep conversation around AI and it was very existential. So I'll put the link to that for everybody. If you haven't seen that or you're new to the channel, you definitely want to hear this convo. Yeah, anyway, just to say that I really always appreciate these deep, profound conversations. And I think especially in eclipse season and at Scorpio eclipses, we are definitely seeking that kind of, we have to go beyond the surface. And these conversations are very much assisting us. So thank you. Thank you for coming back and sharing your wisdom. So
thank you for the platform.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for those of you who don't know me or new to the channel, I'm Irlianna Samsara. I do Hellenistic astrology blended with modern. And Elodie is, well, I'll just read you her bio. She is a French-Canadian astrologer born on the east coast of Quebec, or Quebec, as they would say it, and is currently living on the island off the grid in Newfoundland. She writes horoscopes for Astrograph and Mountain Astrologer, along with her private consulting. She's a consulting astrologer. Research, divination, teaching, archaeoastronomy, try that one on, and the study of various healing modalities are her main interest outside of simple living, communing with nature and animals in the most embodied ways possible. And her website, and I'll put the link below again, is www.ninthhouseastrology.com. And the ninth is spelled number 9, ninthhouseastrology.com. So that's Elodie. That's just an introduction. So yeah, let's dive in.
Thanks so much.
So, I know we were talking about, wow, yes, we're in the midst of this, going through the rapids of this, of this eclipse season. And I'd like to talk about what's coming up for 2023, kind of start the conversation going. Of course, we're both in our work going to be talking about this at great length throughout the year, but just to get the convo starting around what's going to be happening next year. But before we do, how are you doing with this eclipse season? I'm noticing a lot of things falling away that, one moment they're there and then it's like, oh no, game over, that immediate impact that an eclipse can bring. But how are you doing with it?
Personally, so far good, knocking on wood. I do think that the current square between Saturn and Uranus is playing out. I see it playing out for a lot of people, so there seems to be still a lot of dislodging to do, even though eclipse bring that kind of momentum. I feel like we're going to see a lot of that dislodging finally kind of concluding in the spring of 2023. That's my speculation because of Mars, Mars retrograde right now ruling over the first eclipse, and just kind of looking at what Mars does, it won't exit its shadow until, the equinox. So I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of things wanting to move. Obviously the fixed signs, people who have a lot of fixed planets are the one kind of getting the grunt of it. But because we're talking about fixed signs, we're talking about like things that are very, very deeply rooted. So the process is not, I find, hasn't been as instantaneous as I would like. And some, my clients also, what I've experienced, people around me, it seems that there's a bit of like a one step forward, two step back kind of rhythm.
And the fixed signs being, for those of you new to astrology, the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So if you have planets or placements, rising, or especially rising or sun, but planets in those fixed signs, yeah, that's where you're feeling it. And you're right, it is. It's more of a process that with fixed signs, it takes place over time. So yeah, you're right. And it's like not to feel bad about things not plowing forward. It's like it's going to take the settling in. into a very incredible year.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I noticed with the Scorpio Taurus eclipse now with this cycle so far is that on a mundane level, we're seeing immediate sort of manifestation. Last November 2021, we had that stampede at the astral world. And now we just got this, with this eclipse, which is the same cycle, we just, the incident in Korea happened. So we can see that these kind of instant manifestation in the world. But in people's personal life, I find that there's like a bit of like not moving forward because it's Scorpio Taurus and it's so stubborn.
Right. Now that then we'll have the eclipse with this Uranus conjunct the moon, and that'll be a little firecracker up our butts.
Yeah, but all of these planets are meeting Saturn a few days after the eclipse again. Yeah. So we're seeing this kind of urge and restlessness and momentum to like really initiate new things and try new things, and then Saturn being like, not quite yet. You got to finish your homework.
Yeah.
You know,
you got to do it. You got to do it where it's lasting change. You know, and
yeah.
And be patient. And, yeah, so it is definitely a rough time like that.
But I do think that whatever is playing out now is gonna finally sort of really unfold in spring of 2023, and I guess that's a lot of what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah. Let's dive in. So what we're gonna talk about, you guys, is that we're gonna talk about there's 3 outer planets changing signs. The nodes are changing. And the other major, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little points that we're going to make in this conversation. And then in the summer, we'll have Venus, even though that is a personal planet. It only happens every year and a half that she goes retrograde. So she's going to go retrograde in July. So we'll start with January. I know Mars will finish its retrograde and start moving forward, but I think that one of the biggest, maybe the most combustible months, it would be March. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's in a larger context. If we take a step back, we know that we've entered the air period. We know that there's major sort of societal transitional things happening. It's harder to get work. It's harder to do the things the way we've always done. And we're kind of, until the end of this year, we're kind of in the rattling of this and wrestling with that new reality that's emerging. And I think that by the time we get to the spring equinox, that's really, that's really when things are going to start moving forward in terms of like, okay, this is totally new. I'm on new territory. Right now, we kind of still have a foot in the comfort zone, maybe a little bit. And Mars retrograde in Gemini right now, is kind of mirroring the range of possibilities. And I think a lot of people are kind of like extending themselves in a lot of different directions. Maybe this, maybe that, entertaining a lot of different options. And I think we're going to gain clarity a lot more, by the time March arrives. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, that's great. You're right. It's very important to consider Mars in retrograde in Gemini. And what I also think on a mystical, because I love how you delve into these deep existential and mystical planes of consciousness. And, when I think about Gemini and telepathy and communication in other realms, and Mars being out of bounds in retrograde, that's a huge amount. That's where we could really cultivate some serious mojo with telepathic communication or otherworldly, right? When you think about Gemini and the magician and magic and Mercury and Mars in this Mercury magic temple.
I love that. That's a really great take, especially that part of this retrograde, Mars is square Neptune, you know?
That's blending, I would think, that's like the invitation, go transcend this world, this crazy world, and go deeper, go into this other transcendent consciousness, and you'll find your answers, your solutions, you'll find your direction, the direction that we were so bound by with Mars. I think of Mars is like a compass, the little arrow, and it's like, oh no, let me change my direction. Well, when we go into those mystical realms, we're going to see everything really differently.
I agree. And that's part of the air period. I do think like a lot more of that connectivity with others and psychic occurrence I'm seeing an increase of energy worker and psychic and all of that online, which is again like very like instantaneous. We can just see the interconnectedness and learn so quickly from each other. So it's all very like a current era type thing. On a very lower level, I would say that Mars in Gemini retrograde is really this over squaring Neptune is people are so overwhelmed with the amount of information, you know, and Mars is also focused, like you're saying, it's an arrow, and there's this lack of focus a little bit when you're online. It's so easy to be like, I'm gonna go look at my message, and then you're like an hour later you're like, why did I come online? I can't remember. And it can be really alienating because we are compelled, because we're manipulated psychologically in these social media platform, corporate social media platform. So I do think people are seeking to transcend that reality to a certain extent, but it's our way of socializing also. And so it's really hard to remove yourself entirely from that experience. So I like your take about maybe just taking it a step further. And what does it mean, you know, not on this surface level experience, material experience, but deeper, like what could it bring to us? Yeah, I like that.
Like when you think about the internet is like, you know, artificial intelligence and it's this internet connection. But what if we got rid of the technology part and just connected with our minds, you know, like create the real internet? Like
it's happening. Yeah, and I think it's happening. I mean, I have a lot of instance of that in my personal life. I went to school. I trained with Lynn Buchanan, remote viewing.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and I mean, remote viewing is becoming kind of more of common knowledge. And what I'm realizing is that in a dream state, that's a lot of what we do already. We're remote viewing, and I think it's a natural muscle in human and then natural sense, but it's just kind of atrophied. But yeah, I'm seeing, you know, I was playing card last night with friends, and then we just played the game like, guess the card, what card am I holding, you know, and I'm gonna send it to you, and we were just so successful at it. So
I love that.
Yeah, and I do think that the internet is just a metaphor for that interconnectedness that we have, and it's just being brought up and brought out, you know.
Yeah, I love that. That would be a good thing to do, is just practice with cards or whatever, you know, practice with your friends and connect with them in that way, away from technology. It's a whole other thing. And I would think too, being off grid, man, I mean, I spent 3 weeks in the Everglades once, many, many years ago, and it was incredible. Like the downloads you get when you're untied to all this tech, and
but I'm tied here. Yeah, I mean, I'm tied here anyway, because that's the reality now, is that you can be anywhere in the world and you're still connected, you know?
Yeah, well, you got the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I mean, the city, the one thing in the city is the sensitivity to the world around you and the realities around you, especially when you have neighbor and stuff. There is, if you open yourself psychically, then you become a lot more susceptible to, if you don't have nature around you, then you become a lot more susceptible, and it could be draining to, you know, everything, the business around. That's one thing. That's one thing I have a really hard time when I go to Montreal or reintegrate in a city for a couple of weeks. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm just feeling everybody around.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that I'd like to take that and lead into Saturn. We talk about March here with Saturn's ingress into Pisces, and Pisces representing that mystical, transcendent realm. I think that's something we're all going to have to, we're all going to take this journey, right? So 2.5 years is what Saturn spends in a sign. So what do you think of the possibilities for that?
Well, okay, so when I think about Saturn all the time and entering a sign, I'm always like, what's the word? Obviously, because we're talking about Saturn. Saturn is, you know, we love Saturn. Saturn brings a lot of refinement and clarity in the long term. But usually the initial experience will be the negative kind of aspects of the sign it enters.
Right.
So when Saturn entered Aquarius 2 years ago, we went into lockdown, which is very sort of typical for Saturn being on its home turf. You know, it's just extremely strong. so I was thinking about Saturn Pisces. I was like, what's the worst thing about Pisces?
Right.
and
Start
Pisces,
with the worst.
confusion.
Right.
Not
Deception.
confusion, and really not being sure. And so I was like, maybe we're gonna have this kind of overwhelmness of just not being sure, because it already has started, this difficulty of discerning what is real, what is not, especially with our online experience and the information we consume and the news and what's happening in the world. There's deep fakes, there's false news, there's conspiracy theories, and everybody's broadcasting their own realities. And it becomes really hard to know actually what's the line except your own sort of truth. So I do think that with like, we're already kind of being initiated into the Saturn Pisces with this, it's never just something out of context. So I do think it's going to bring more confusion in terms of what's real and what's not, on a mundane level, probably like more virtual reality, more immersive experiences online, and less and dissociation with maybe the material world a little bit more. So that would be the more exaggerated negative sort of interpretation I would make with Saturn and Pisces. But as we know, with Saturn, this process of refinement and clarification happens. So eventually that would probably lead to more clarity.
Right.
And yes. and more discernment.
Yeah. And it wants us to accomplish great things once we learn those lessons. There are, yeah. And then when we learn those lessons, then what happens? I think of also Saturn, like initiation by a spiritual master. And then like the doors opened. Oh, I got chills. The doors of perception open and you're able to see, but you have to be responsible, right? It's going to demand accountability and responsibility. You don't mess around. You don't play with fire. These realms have a lot, like you were saying, there's a lot that goes on in those realms, and it's not always good neighborhoods. So we do have to be very discerning. I think too, with Jupiter being back in Aries, and it'll zip through Aries and go into Taurus in May, Jupiter and Taurus. But when it's in Aries, it could be like, it's saying, hey, look, we have to find what's true for ourselves. When you said earlier, it could be confusing. It'll be, what is my truth and how do I connect personally to cosmic consciousness? And I think that'll help us with, good point. That's what I've been saying about Mars and currently in Gemini. Mars in Gemini until, mid-March of 2023 is because Mars in Gemini is about multiplicity. One of the sort of remedial measures is returning to your own truth, returning to your own center of focus, so a lot can be said for all of the mutable sign, Sag, Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces. So Saturn Pisces has the same flavor of dispersion and disintegration and a lack of boundaries and more confusion. So like you said, with Jupiter, which is the ruler of Pisces in Aries, that could be a lot about just your own inner truth, outside of the theater of the media and the information and social media. We have to really hone that knowingness.
And then with Jupiter in Taurus, again, more embodiment. And what is embodiment? When I think of Saturn Pisces, especially for the young generation, because Saturn Pisces people will have their Saturn return now, the younger generation, which I've been consulting with for a few years. And one of the characteristics I noticed from that young generation, they're not sure. They're not really sure of things. They're confused a little bit about what's true. What is it that I want? I don't know. There's a lot of doubt. And I was thinking like a 14, 15-year-old now, their experience is probably mostly online. They play video game with virtual reality, with headset, with other people. And so the boundary between like actually like doing the dishes versus like being immersed in a video game,
right?
It kind of becomes like all seamless. And I'm born pre-internet, you are too, so we know the world before internet. It's easier for us to make the distinction, but for the younger generation, can they really make the distinction?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, and we're going to see that later in the cycle of Saturn in Pisces once it gets to Neptune. Obviously, I think that's kind of going to be the crucible of that transit, but
Yes.
that's not before until 2024.
Yeah, that'll be the following year's conversation. Yeah, but you can see all this leading up. And then, of course, all right, so that's Saturn and Pisces. And then March 23rd, the other big blast is, Pluto entering the sign of Aquarius, where it's going to spend the next 20 years. So huge. When it was in Capricorn, it was 15 years. And each sign, it's a little bit different length, but 20 years, it's a whole generation. That's huge.
And when we talk about Aquarius, once again, I think we have been initiated into the air period officially, 2 years ago, and with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius and Saturn Aquarius. So we know artificial intelligence, all of these aspects of modern technologies may be accelerating extremely fast. That's one of my speculation. What's your opinion on Pluto and Aquarius?
When you're saying acceleration, Pluto does not do things lightly. It's this deep obsession, and where the danger is being completely consumed by Aquarian, like you think of those people with the goggles, those virtual reality goggles, and like that all they see is this artificial world. It's like, oh my God. And then they get addicted to that. And like, they lose themselves in that. So losing yourself was the danger part of it with Pluto and Aquarius. But another piece of it I see is with Sean Nygaard did a great talk for a Chuda's speaker series last year when I was in Nightlight, and he talked about Pluto and Aquarius, and he said how the center cannot hold, and he talked about how King Louis XIV and the French Revolution, the center was, of course, the nobles and the nobility. And then when that collapsed, it was in Pluto and Aquarius, the outsiders become the insiders.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, because there is this dissonance. Aquarian is for the people. So,
right. So they literally stormed the palace, right? All the mobs, you think about the mobs of people that were smashing the mirrors of Versailles. And, you can imagine this melee, but it's like this, people are like sick and tired of the power, the plutocracy, it's like, done, time for
I forget about that, but that's true, because we're talking about the opposite of Leo. We're talking about the opposite of what is it, nobility and royalty, and we're already seeing this as soon as when the Queen passed. I remember a few astrologers making comments of like, okay, this is the introduction of Pluto and Aquarius, and so it begins, where we're dismantling this hierarchical thing, which already been happening. But that's true that with Pluto and Aquarius, that's going to be definitely a more of a horizontal structure as opposed to vertical. Mm-hmm. Definitely. But then, I guess when I'm thinking about Pluto and Aquarius and I'm looking at technology, I was watching, I don't know if you know David Suzuki, but he's like a nature researcher, scientist here in Canada, and he has this show called The Nature of Thing, which is accessible on internet and stuff. But he did one episode on technology, and he was saying obviously everything accelerates very quickly, and in the next decade that we can't even imagine how fast technology is going to evolve. And I'm just looking at the last 10 years. I didn't even have a cell phone in 2011.
Wow.
And I didn't need one really. I had like maybe a flip phone I was sharing with my partner, and now like 10 years later, I'm working online. I'm constantly plugged in. Even our phone technology, like we have these little videos, and I think there's more space on my phone than on my computer. So just in the last 10 years, technology went really fast. So
sure. There it is.
Yeah, money less experience, all of these things I think is already being implemented. So that's what I think of when I think of Pluto and Aquarius. But in another sense, it does give more power to the people also.
reclaiming our power. Yeah, like we're the kings of and queens of our own existence. We don't, it's not this external king that we're like paying homage to, like Louis XIV. And it's, yeah, metaphorically, it's like the power is within us. I also think about Aquarian energy. I always associate it with Kundalini rising, the light body, the nervous system, the light body. So this chapter of history with Pluto's entrance into Aquarius is that we reinvent ourselves. We completely, fully reinvent ourselves. Well, you want to put on goggles and go into Zuckerberg's metaverse? I mean, you know, that's your choice. Or plan B is that, you know, how do you want to die? You know,
in the metaverse.
In the metaverse, oh, cause of death, metaverse.
Well, we are talking about Pluto, and Pluto.
Yeah, it is Pluto, right?
Yeah.
Pluto takes no prisoners, but it's the reinvention, the reprogramming of the light body of you know, stepping into our power with our physically our light, and considering just that whole notion of this huge paradigm shift, reprogramming the light body, Kundalini rising. The future, Aquarius, right? It's the future. And how do we want to reprogram ourselves, and what needs to die so that we can have this opportunity?
Yeah, there's something so paradoxical about Aquarius. In traditional astrology, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, you know? And I did this research last year, where a lot of politicians, because we know Aquarian people are very idealistic and they want to bring change to society, and a lot of the Aquarian politicians were actually conservative, which kind of like speaks for the Saturnian side. But in modern astrology, Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius, and so in pop culture we always attribute Aquarius to great invention, and you know, Tesla and all of that, and it is very paradoxical, and I think both are true. How about, what do you think of time and our awareness of time and quantum physics may be accelerating?
Oh yeah, because Saturn rules time.
But we're talking about this sort of high, it's not Saturn in Capricorn, it's not Saturn in Aquarius. Now we're talking about Pluto, which comes and destroy. Pluto is really this process of, you know, change that is done through like destruction, basically. And we're seeing with Pluto and Capricorn the destruction of the old hierarchical structure and the old capitalist model, just not sustainable. So Pluto and Aquarius could bring this sort of new awareness around time, and how time is actually a lot more flexible and less linear than we're actually thinking.
I love that.
Yeah, because you were talking about light body and things like that. And I've been playing around a lot just with my consciousness in terms of like trying to stretch time or view time differently and stuff. Obviously, the process of material reality, time and decay still exists. But what if time was we know theoretically that time is a lot more malleable. Science is proving it. So what if the technologies in the next 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius really brings that to the forefront?
The time machine, H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
That just flashed.
Yeah. But when you said Pluto and Aquarius, all I see is a science fiction cover. Like, I can't help but seeing, you know, there's something very science fiction about Pluto and Aquarius. We're here, you know?
Yeah. Or is I know with like science, Steven Spielberg once said science fiction, when he talked about Jurassic Park, actually, he said that's not science fiction, that's science eventuality. And that came out in 1993. So we're in the Saturn return of that movie. But yeah, and it's like the event, well, of course, genetic engineering with the dinosaurs, we saw how that has unfolded over these years. But so what could be eventual, a really positive outcome of that is the eventuality that we do claim this, we destroy the old structures, and we come from the future. You think about Aquarian it's building a structure from the future into the now, like a future
Yep.
life progression. You know, how do you want your life to look, and what do you need to do, and what do you need to drop, and what needs to die in order to have this really powerful future, and where we are sovereign beings. This is obviously, you know, not an everyday conversation, but hey, you know, you're on this set. This is why I love you so much. You know,
But there's something, but it's true. There's something utopian about Aquarius. There's this utopian civilization, and I've seen people talking about this. The new, what is it called? Like, there's a lot about the galactic center online, and people coming from different parts of the galaxy and the new consciousness. Even I've seen even a few astrologer, Pamela, she's a British astrologer, Pam Gregory, even speaking about that, like vibrating to the 4 dimension as opposed to the, there's this trend right now about like even just vibration, vibrating to a higher frequency, so you're not in this lower awareness state, density state, which is also very fundamental principle in spirituality, meditation, mantras, you know, just a different way of talking about the same things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you speak of this kind of new human, or human visiting from the future, or ourselves speaking to ourselves in the future, or different things like that, that's all very Aquarian. That's why I was saying science fiction. It's very utopian.
Yeah, I love that part of Aquarian. Like, that's who I am, utopian. Let's all share. We're all rock stars.
yeah, but so yes, but because I'm such a Saturn heavy person, I have to say that the danger of the Saturn or the Aquarian utopia is also what we're seeing with transhumanism, and people wanting this rigid agenda for humanity, which is really self-serving, but they're kind of coming as like doing this for the greater good, but imposing it on the world.
Right, that's the shadow of it.
Which this shadow of Aquarius, yeah.
So we beware of these things.
Be mindful of that for sure. Yeah.
So just, I know it's hard to leave a Pluto conversation and go, oh, and now on to this. Now we're going to talk about Jupiter and Taurus. It's like, oh well, woo.
Yeah, smaller transit in the year next year, but I think it's going to be personally, I'm very happy to see Jupiter going in Taurus. So I don't know how you feel about that personally, but
I'm happy for it where it's showing up in my houses, but
yeah, well, same here.
Yeah.
So we're just finishing Jupiter in Pisces now. Jupiter will re-enter Aries at the end of 2022, and then Jupiter enters Taurus in May.
Right. So this is going to speed its way in from late December. It'll enter what is it? Zero Aries around right after Christmas, and then it'll just speed right through. No more retrogrades in Aries. Boom. May 16th.
Yeah. So we have 4.5 months to start 2023 with Jupiter in Aries, and then the rest of the year will be Jupiter in Taurus.
Yeah, and that's about a 1-year transit. Happens about every 12 years. So, you know, again, anywhere in your chart where you have Taurus, you know, here comes Jupiter again, and we look back around 12 years and we can find, you know, what expands. You know, Jupiter's about expansion and luck and opportunity, and, you know, on a spiritual level, divine grace. You know, what is my truth regarding well, Taurus things, my possessions, my money, what you know, the things that are important to me, my talents, my self-esteem. I think it could certainly literally boost one's self-esteem depending on, you know, where the condition of our Venus, but
and I think it's going to continue doing the job of Uranus, and as we know, the North Node has been transiting here in Taurus for, you know, it's going to be 2 years by then almost. So in a way, it's a continuing story on the Taurus axis, continuing what the North Node and Uranus is bringing. which I think is kind of returning to more simple ways of doing things, returning to simple eating, this awareness of like how food is toxic, like modified food is really problematic. So people are looking to simplify, making their bread, having small garden, being more self-sufficient. That's all very
a huge jump in, you know, growing your own food, I would think too. Yeah.
Which was brought, I think, with the lockdown. There was like a huge I know in Canada here, like a huge sort of people were compelled to make their bread and start plants indoors, and then transplant outside and have their garden. And that is all very Taurus, and I think Jupiter in Taurus is just going to continue that business,
build that up.
Like people you know, wanting to be self-sufficient, wanting to generate their own electricity, because we're talking about Uranus and Taurus, and Uranus is going to be in Taurus still while Jupiter is there. So it's going to be, that's where the action or the growth or the compelling is happening. And we're talking, Taurus is about security, feeling safe, feeling rooted.
Yes. And maybe when Uranus and Jupiter and Uranus won't hook up until 2024, but maybe there's some seeds planted. I'm just wondering out loud right now with these eclipses, where you know, with Venus, you know, ruling this lunar eclipse, and maybe there'll be some kind of expansion of some idea that happens that might show up and play out when Jupiter meets up with Uranus, because the moon's meeting up with Uranus on November 8th, the eclipse. So therefore, when Jupiter meets up with Uranus, wow, that might be really bringing that out big time.
Totally. Yeah, that's true. And that's why I like to kind of contextualize, always take a step back, because these ingress of planets and transit, there's always a bigger context, you know. And so as we see the North Node in Taurus, North Node being very compelling and a lot of momentum in that direction, it's not necessarily that it's better or more positive, but it's just, that's where the momentum is happening. And Taurus has a lot to do with stabilizing, simplifying, and really listening to the intuition of the body. And we see people getting back into traditional Chinese medicine, and through the breath and embodiment and mindfulness. That's all very in the Taurus rhythm, which is natural rhythm and not society's rhythm.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of the nodes, we're going to July 17th, the nodes are going to shift into Aquarius, Aries. So they go backwards, as for those of you who are, you know, kind of new to all this, nodes go backwards. So they're going to enter 29 degrees, 59 minutes. So the North Node will be in Aries, and North Node. I'm always flipping things. North Node in Aries, and the South Node will be in Libra. And then it'll slowly move their way back. And of course, that means the eclipses are going to start happening they will shift from Taurus and Scorpio. We'll have the first one will peak in next April. We'll have 29 degrees of Aries solar eclipse. And the nodes will still be in the Taurus Scorpio axis. And sometimes there is that overlap with eclipses. The nodes won't catch up into that sign until the summer, but we're going to have our first taste of this axis with the solar eclipse 29 degrees in revolution and consciousness. Why do I say that? When I looked and saw do you know that the American Revolution started at 29 Aries?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like the Battle of what was it, Fort Sumter, whatever that, Concord and Lexington and Concord, I think. Yeah. So I'm like 29 degrees. So, okay, I'm not going to say we're going to go to war, but it's a war of consciousness. And it's this, we have a lot of work on the inner to do. So yeah, I just wanted to.
I'm looking forward to this cycle. I really enjoyed Jupiter in Aries. I thought it was extremely refreshing personally. The return to individuality, the return to self-agency, the return to personal power,
courage and drive.
Courage, yeah, and because Jupiter is in Aries until May. you know, I think Jupiter in Aries is laying the ground for these eclipses also. So
Yes, yes, it will.
Eclipse eclipse cycle in the signs lasts for a year and a half. So then we begin a year and a half of, and I do think, you know, it's interesting that we see always planets squaring the nodal axis. And so there's always these push and pull. Everything is not just moving in one direction. We see this kind of like tug between the past and the future. So as astrologer, we kind of have this synthesis of that, and it's hard to break it down. But interestingly, Pluto and Aquarius bring this Aquarian like momentum of community, or, you know, the human community, while the North Node eclipses in Aries will bring way more individual sort of momentum. And so yes, I do think that that might bring war and confrontation and things like that, because we're going to have this group saying we're doing this for everybody, and then and it's already started, and then we're going to have people who are like, yeah, but, you know, what about the individual? For example, the healthcare system. Let's say that the healthcare system is it's an Aquarian idea that like in Canada here, the healthcare system is universal. Everybody has access to it, but it's extremely problematic. And people who have money go to private anyway. Right. And if you want an appointment at the hospital, it can take months. So it's free in this Aquarian principle, but on an individual level, yeah. And so at some point, the reality catches up with the individual, and the individual is like, hey, like, this is not fair. And so I think the North Node in Aries is going to be a lot of that. Right.
Yeah. And Pluto's going to be, I didn't add this on, but Pluto's going to be squaring the nodes for a little bit, you know.
For first half of the year, yeah.
Yeah, the first half. So that's definitely a lot of deep systemic change. And talk about, you know, detox, another round of, so that's the nodes. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about today was just that, and it seems it's as light as a feather, it seems, compared to all the heavy talk here, but hey, you know, it's important. It's a major transit, Venus going into Leo, and it'll be conjunct, it will go in at July 22nd, and it's at 28 degrees Leo, which is very close to Regulus. And Regulus is now at 0 Virgo. It has gone into 0, when about maybe 10 years ago, I think it went from 2000 years, right, in one sign, in one sign, and it went from 29 Leo to 0 Virgo. So Regulus being one of the major royal stars, it's a huge star in astro magic. When you think about Regulus, the ruler, the king, so it's interesting because here's monarchy, and we're driven to be in service with our vitality, and our vital life source. It's like giving it, being in service with it. And so that would be a nice highlight. Maybe I think it'll be an interesting coloration to this Venus transit. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, Venus is my girl, I have to say.
Yay.
And I don't think it's that small in comparison, because Venus, and it ties into what's happening now. Right. It ties into the cycle of Venus just finishing up now and being eclipsed and combust with the sun just at the end of September, and finishing a big like part of her bigger cycle of conjunction happening in Scorpio and now she will start to have that happening in Libra. So I do think it ties in, because we just had the Sun Venus Cazimi happening. Right. And so the next one will happen during her retrograde cycle in August. So I think, again, it ties into not exactly the same way as now, but it does kind of tie into her cycle. And Venus has a lot to do with our experience, like our immediate experience, because it's what we value. It's how we value ourselves, and it's what we attribute worth to. And that's also shifting majorly, that we want it or not. It is shifting majorly in the reality of what's happening culturally in our personal life, as we have seen with Venus being eclipsed in Scorpio and just disappearing. Right. So, you know, we're talking about a big societal shift, but these societal shifts affect the individual and affects what we want.
Yes.
what we want, and that's Venus. So I think it's super important. And so, you know, in July, Venus in Leo, it's gonna be, yeah, I mean, I'm a Venus and Leo person, so in a way I guess I could say that Venus and Leo wants to have fun.
Oh yeah.
It's a fire sign, and so it's a little bit about just like pleasure and playfulness and joy. So we might need more of that, you know, and it might be an expression of how can we reintegrate more pleasure and joy and not just work and hustle, and because we get caught up in this grind that is going faster and faster and faster. And again, everything that's happening in Taurus with the natural rhythm I was talking about, Jupiter in Taurus, and this sort of whoa, I think it has something to do with artificial intelligence replacing human, and we're trying to keep the speed. Us human are trying to keep the pace of things with artificial intelligence and absorbing so much information we can't compute. Like we have to just slow down a little bit and be like, hey, like, am I allowed to just go have a picnic, you know?
Right, exactly.
Can I just go have a picnic and ride my bicycle?
Yeah. Can I just go to movies and have some fun?
Yeah.
Be a little lighthearted and
yeah, exactly. So I do think like we're not, you know, as astrologers, we know we're in a state of transition. These next few years are very transitional, and everything is in a state of flux. We're reevaluating what we love, what we want to do. Our relationship to money is changing, material reality, and all of that. So I think that Venus retrograde is going to be important on an individual level for sure.
Giving us, yeah. It's a great how you tied that all in. Thank you. That is really great. So this is our opening salvo of the conversation for 2023. I feel I'm really grateful to you for helping us to see, you know, this big picture and what the kind of general energies. And then of course we'll get, as we move through this, we'll drill down and get more granular with all of that. But
I love talking to you. Thanks for having me. It's always good chatting.
Yeah, great. So remember everybody, it's the link is below. Ninth House, www.ninthhouseastrology.com is how and where you can contact Elodie, and also catch her the monthly horoscopes on time passages, right? Isn't that
Astrograph website? Yeah.
Astrograph, the astrograph.com website. Yeah, great stuff. I mean, just so yay.
Thanks so much. Yeah. And I guess I would love to catch up with you halfway through the next year to have a little
we'll have to, hopefully not that long. We'll do another check-in and like, how are you doing there? Because, it's always a joy to talk to you, Elodie. I so appreciate you. So, okay, that's all for today. And I hope everybody has a great, planning and hopefully this conversation will give you lots of empowerment and lots of good juice for, how we can be inspired by these transits. So, okay, everyone. Well, until next time, this is Irlianna Samsara, StarSound Speaks, StarSoundastrology.com. Thank you all for listening. Namaste.
Bye.